Welcome to Seeing This. I'm Mike Ornelas, and I'm humbled to be joined by director Tony Benna, as well as executive producer Lee Einhorn, whose documentary, Andre is an Idiot, explores how a man named Andre navigates the news of a colon cancer diagnosis in a more positive fashion that is as unique as Andre himself, while examining the impact it has on loved ones around him. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely. As I mentioned about Andre, he's quite a unique individual. I don't know if I've seen a documentary with a person in focus quite like this. When did this all start? How did you first meet Andre, and what was your first impressions upon meeting him?
I mean, I met Andre, probably 20 years before making this documentary at an ad agency, which was a production company in San Francisco. He was a creative director, writer, and I was directing and getting into animation and all these things. And as my career grew and I started directing more and more TV spots and these sort of things, animations, he would hire me to direct his ideas. And his ideas were insane, just as insane as the man you'll meet in the film. So every Andre project was it was exhilarating in a way, but you're like, I might break a bone, we might get arrested. You never knew with Andre. And my first impression of him was this is the craziest and most creative, brilliant ad man I'd ever met. He didn't really seem to fit in the ad world. He was a brilliant writer, and he's one of those like mad scientist minds that you wanted to tap into, and I think we tap into it a little bit in the film.
Yeah, the cover, the poster of the film gives that mad scientist energy with his hair and everything. This documentary has one of the funniest openings of any documentary I've ever seen, and it really sets the tone early for what the audience is in for. Can you speak to how did you find balancing that tone throughout the film, considering it's such, heavy material about Andre's health after he was diagnosed with late stage colon cancer. Um, how did you navigate that tone whilst being true to Andre's sensibilities?
Yeah, I mean, I think that from the beginning, Andre wanted this to be a comedy. He didn't want to make a sad movie. The same way he didn't want the people around him to really dwell or sit in sadness of the tragedy he was going through. And so, I knew early on, obviously, cancer is not funny, but Andre is one of the most hilarious, irreverent people you'll ever meet. And so I figured, if anyone could make a situation like this humorous, it's Andre. Um, and balancing it wasn't all that difficult because Andre kept us laughing. I like to say, there's that old saying of, humor is the best medicine, and I think our laughter is the best medicine. And in this case, it wasn't just the best medicine for Andre, but it was really the best medicine for all of us. And I think he teaches us in the film that it's okay sometimes to look at hard times in your life with humor, and it might help you get through it and help the people around you as well.
But when you're starting a documentary like this, it's got to be difficult to kind of outline the A to B to C because so many things can kind of come up or happen considering the situation. Were there times in the documentary where you had to really pivot what your original image or vision was for the doc? And if so, what were those moments like on the fly to adjust?
Yeah, a documentary, it's unfolding as you're shooting. You don't really know the story that you're gonna end up with, and we just let it unfold naturally. I mean, Andre, at first, he really wanted to look into these kind of, maybe pseudo cancer cures or people that were taking advantage of cancer patients, and, we looked into it, but it didn't really seem like the story was there. I think pretty quickly within the first year I was noticing the stories actually, your family and the people around you. And so we focused on that, but I told Andre, of course, anything you want to look into, let us know and we'll film it, which giving Andre that freedom is insane because he's like, I want to go to a uranium mine in Montana, or I want to go to a crystal healing session, or I want to do 9 grams of mushrooms. We sort of let him pick and choose what he wanted to look into. And then, so, once we got to the edit phase, the difficult part was cutting out things. We had so much footage and so many fun and outrageous moments. It was really tough to squeeze it all into like a 90-minute, tight package.
Let me ask you, Lee, you're listed as an executive producer, but you also you're also a close friend of Andres. And I'm curious, as someone who has worked as a producer on other projects, What was it like navigating this particular documentary from such a more personal space?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this was unlike any project that either of us have ever worked on, and certainly, from for me, being so, a big part of all of it, and then also the best friend portion of it is really what put that kind of over the top and made it completely different. I mean, I think there was a point where or not a point, but I think throughout where I really had to separate myself from that friendship in some ways. I mean, sometimes I leaned into it, but sometimes separate from it in order just to concentrate on, making the film that we knew that, Tony had a vision for, that we had a vision for, and that Andre wanted to make. And then there was times where I had to, jump right back immediately minutes later into that friendship mode as well. If Andre was feeling sick when we were out somewhere shooting and I had to tend to some of the needs that he might have there as well. And then obviously my role as sort of a character in the film as well, was another piece of it for sure. So I think, for me it was, it was multifaceted in that there was all these different roles that I was taking on. And I would say it was much harder, to do something like this where, mostly for that friendship and, I mean, neither of us wanted to have the outcome that the movie had. We had always hoped that we were going to make something and then we'll come up with a great ending because Andre lived and he got on into a study that saved his life or whatever. But all of that was sort of always in my head, in that best friendship role, as we were shooting. So, 100% different than anything I had ever worked on before.
I can only imagine, and it's got to be very challenging to balance, kind of both positions that you're in. And I really appreciate your vulnerability, in the moments expressing, particularly like how hard it was just to like call him up on the phone and act like everything's normal. Like Andre wanted to keep everything to be the same. I'm curious if that became more difficult as things progressed and Andre's health declined. Like, did you find yourself in a position where it's like two men lost at sea, and once one person starts to weaken, you get stronger? Or what was that whole experience like as things progress?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think initially when you were started to ask that question, I was like, yes, it got much harder, But then when you kind of came around with the 2 minute C metaphor, which I like, I think there was a time where I felt like I did have to step up and kind of, help keep things moving forward. Again, Tony and I both always had Andre's goal in mind. Make this funny, make it interesting, engaging, and funny, and not just a cry fest. That's the last thing that he ever wanted, right? So I think for me, it certainly got harder as we went along to answer the first part of your question, and I think where Tony edited that bit of Andre and I into the movie was kind of the perfect point in sort of, I mean, the movie in a lot of ways, well, it obviously sort of looked at those 3 years and it placed it in the perfect spot. It was a point where Andre was getting sicker and sicker. He had just come out of doing radiation, which was the hardest thing that he had done. He was, as he said, good at chemo after all the hangovers he had had for all those years. And
Sure.
I think it was that point where I felt, and I think Tony, you remember, you were like, "Hey, I want you to go talk to him today about how he's always pushing that everything's okay, everything's okay." And maybe I had brought it up to you how, whenever I call him, he had done that thing where he's like, "Hey, what's up? How's it going?" And I was like, "Yeah, bullshit. Come on, you're not feeling that good. You just told me, And I think I said in that scene how I appreciated getting a text from him that showed a little bit of what truly was going on with his health and and how he was, and that facade had been dropped a little bit because I think it felt more normal and more expected as to what I felt like he was probably feeling. um but I think I'll speak for both of us. I think we both had to carry the torch as we got further and further along, because as Andre got sicker, you know we were probably more worried about, should we keep going? Is it okay? Whatever. And, but for him, we continue to be strong and continue to, carry on basically. So,
You know, this film does a great job of subverting the typical position of how you respond or how you're supposed to act when you're diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. And it really highlights the importance of perspective. And Andre had a unique, positive perspective in the situation. I'm curious, Tony, when constructing kind of the I don't want to say narrative, but like the beats of the film. Were there moments where there were difficult times early on for Andre, and you decided to kind of maybe cut that and save more of that for later in his journey when things get worse? How was that? How did you navigate kind of just keeping that kind of beat structure for the film?
The edit really is representational of what we went through with Andre, to be honest. I mean, he did keep that humor and irreverence up to the end. I did sort of save the audience a little bit of the, maybe fear and grieving that the family Janice was going through, and maybe some of the family members along the way until later. But as far as Andre, he really didn't crack. I don't think really ever. I do think he found a new sense of vulnerability that I mean, I thought he was, I think he thought he was being as vulnerable as he could with his humor and just putting it all out there. But I think, with help from his therapist, Peter, and just going through the process of the 3.5 years with this diagnosis, he became vulnerable in a new way that I think surprised him. But as far as the edit and keeping that cadence, you know, I think that I try to be as true to the experience we had as possible, and to give you the most authentic portrait of Andre as we could.
I love the inclusion of the family and his wife Janice. I loved hearing how they met. I won't spoil that. It does happen early in the film, but I just love that kind of, again, very unique circumstance that they went through. But I'm curious, Lee, as Andre's best friend, you obviously must have been close with Janice as well. How did your guys' relationship kind of evolve through this whole process? Were there moments where you guys had like tough conversations when Andre wasn't present? What was that whole dynamic like?
Yeah, I mean, just to give you the background, we Andre and I met at 25 years ago at an ad agency. We became instant friends. Our wives are, good friends. Not only good friends, but actually born on the same day, same year. He has two
Wow.
daughters, I have three daughters. It was, and Andre and I were from the same, from New York, from the same general area in the world, same born the same year as well. So there was a lot of togetherness in our families. We hung out on weekends together as two families. So obviously very, very close to Janice. I mean, I would say over the course of I think that was part of what made it a little bit easier for us to come in, and in bed and be with them for that period of time too, because we had that ease between us. I think there was definitely some nervousness on Janice's part, as she freely admits in the movie. There was a lot of denial in her part too, in the as we were going through things. And I think, you know, I I don't I think our friendship, if anything, got stronger throughout and is now probably stronger than it's ever been with Andre being gone as well. I mean, I talk to Janice probably every day or every other day, and again, there's a lot happening around the film right now, but we meet for coffee, once every 2 weeks. There's still a lot. Our daughters are good friends. They hang out together. Um, and I think I think the movie and the making of this strengthened all of our relationships. And Tony, you probably agree, right? I mean, just I mean, certainly you and I, but we were, but I think with Janice and Andre as well.
Yeah, sometimes, Mike, we like to think that Andre was such a mastermind that he built this crew around him on purpose, right? He knew he wouldn't be there for Lee, so he put me in his place, I'd like to think that he did, because he really did curate the group around him when we first started the film. It was all people he was comfortable with from his past, and the people we brought in were the same. Our DP had known Andre for years. So all of us coming together, it was like family. So as things became more intimate, it was okay, right? Because there wasn't a bunch of strangers in the room. But yeah, I like to think that Andre kind of set us all up for success, knowing that he might not be here forever.
And it's great because I just have like a more handsomer Andre now. It's fucking awesome.
Less hair, a little less hair. Still Italian.
A testament to Andre's genius.
Yeah.
Send my thanks to Janice and the family to be open and vulnerable, because there's a scene in the film, again, I won't spoil for those who haven't seen it, but like we see Janice being strong throughout the film, and there's a moment towards the end where it's just really hard to keep it together. You know what I mean? And Andre, it's so organic. Again, the way he probably curated everyone to make this film, but it makes it feel so organic and that everyone is going through this together. Um, if you guys would humor me, I want to read you my letterbox review from right after watching the film.
I'd
Um,
love to.
if you want to talk about being effective without being preachy, this documentary nails the importance of getting a colonoscopy. Fuck cancer. So I found, obviously Andre is highlighted in this film, but there's an undertone, obviously, about the importance of your health and getting a colonoscopy. I mean, the whole title, Andre is an idiot, is because we see early on, he didn't go through with getting one. Did you guys have you seen, since some folks have seen the film now, have you seen a shift in the taboo of getting colonoscopies from people you've talked to, from your inner circles, from family? What is the evolution of like kind of the fear of a colonoscopy, particularly from men? Have you seen that evolve over the course of from the start of this film to where we are now?
Yeah, we could both speak to this. I'll just jump in and just say, just ever since the film was released at Sundance, I mean, we probably between Lee and I know a couple hundred people that have gotten their colonoscopies. I would say that 10% of those people found cancerous polyps. Some were in their 30s as well. And so we already know that the film is saving lives in a lot of ways. And we think as we get to a wider and wider audience, we think it can have even more impact. And but the thing about the film is that it's Andre makes it's entertaining, it's funny, but at the end there's a very important message. And I do think that message is it's reaching home. And I'll say one last thing before I let Lee jump in is I've got my group of guy friends all turning 45 this year, and some of those guy friends were like, "There's no way I'm getting a colonoscopy. I'm gonna do the Cologuard. I'm gonna poop in a box, that kind of thing." After they saw the film, they're all calling me. They're all getting their colonoscopies. Everybody's texting each other. I think Lee and Andre really set up this idea of couples colonoscopy between friends is a great way to motivate each other to advocate for your health. And I think it's spreading like wildfire, and that's really exciting. And I think that makes all the work that we did so worth it, and it leaves Andre a much deeper legacy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree, totally. It's like, I mean, it might be that we're in this colorectal cancer bubble that Tony and I live in now. Somehow we've become the faces of colorectal cancer. I mean, we've gone to Washington D.C. We've spoken to Congress recently. We've attended, obviously screenings, movie screenings, not colonoscopy
Mhm.
screenings. But we haven't done any of those live yet.
That'd be interesting bonus content.
We would, but we actually wanted to have my brother get one from my friend Sean, who's a GI doc, on film, but we didn't follow through with that. But you know, it feels to me like we're having an effect on things. It really does, and it's the people that we meet, the people that come up to us randomly. I had a guy recently who was like in a bar, to be honest, and he was a little bit tipsy. He was like, "Hey, don't you go to Dr. McDowell, who's my dentist?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, he's my dentist, and you got him to get a colonoscopy because of your movie, so then I got a colonoscopy." So it feels like there is a snowball effect that's happening. And I think your letterbox thing nailed it. It's like we wanted to make something that was entertaining first, but also engaging to the point of being a public service announcement about, hey, wake up and get a colonoscopy. And it is truly amazing. It is definitely guys that shy away more, but it's funny too, because like we've met plenty of women that have come up to us and is like, "Thank you for that movie. I'm going to tell my husband right now to go get a colonoscopy." And we're like, "What about you?" You know? And they're like, "Well, it's a, colon." And I'm like, people confuse it with prostate. There's so many ways that people get confused about it, where it's like, I've been amazed, that fact alone, it's happened more than once where women are like, "Oh, wait, that's right. We all, have colons." I mean, what did Alfred used to say? There's movies for anyone with an asshole. It's just like that's who this message is for. And I like to think we're having a huge effect. We've done a marketing campaign around it with the agency mechanism where we all have worked at some point in the past. Which has gotten out a bit in a couple cities and online. We're hoping to push that out even more, but you know, that is part of the goal for sure in this is awareness and making a difference.
I think beyond, get your colonoscopy, there's a few other messages in there that are layered in. And I think one is, to consider your mortality, right? We're all busy with our lives. We don't tend to think about death. But Andre allows us to do this in a humorous way, allows us to kind of wake up every morning, consider that idea of memento mori. If we consider our death, that we're going to live a bigger, brighter life. I think that the film really showcases that in a great way. And the other thing is, I know we talked about this earlier a tiny bit, but it's okay to talk about these things. You know, we all shy away from communicating with each other when somebody gets sick. We don't know what to say. We're like, we're after the initial, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, and we send some food or, you know, a card. We don't really know how to interact. And I think what Andre does, and I hope people share this film with each other, that any family member or friends that might be going through cancer or that they need to connect with, that they've maybe lost those relationships. I think if you watch this with your friends and family, all of a sudden it opens up that conversation for you. So I think on a deeper level, the film can impact people in multiple ways, which I'm also very excited about, you know?
Yeah, I think that last point, just to jump on the Tony bandwagon there, is so important because just recently, a few weeks ago, I was at an event in Tucson with, you know, hundreds of colon cancer survivors, families of people who had people that died. And the stories that I heard about, people reacted very strongly to what Tony's saying, which was like, it's amazing how you guys all circled around him because we've had so many people that have never spoken to us again just because we got cancer because they didn't know how to deal, you know? Not, and I think it's super important. And I think Andre, you know, those were the walls that he was breaking down, as Tony said, you know, and yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Tony, because I just think that's become, you know, it's funny as we do Q&As with different people, other themes of the movie tend to like even pop up that were there, but like, you know, it's just what certain people take away from it. So
Yeah. And then, and I'll lastly just say, and not to keep this going forever, but what you were saying earlier, Mike, about using humor, we didn't realize how much impact that would have. But, you know, if you look at a lot of documentaries, especially in subjects as dark as cancer, people tend to use fear. And we kind of went the opposite. Like, what if we approach something that's so hard to talk about with humor, make it approachable? That opens the conversation. And then you can impact second, you know, when you leave the theater, you know, what changes in your mind and hopefully, you know, change like real world, have real world impact on people's.
Absolutely. I mean, to that point, this expands even, I mean, obviously on colon cancer, but I mean, any kind of, you know, having to face your own mortality, like being able to have a community, having people come together and talk about these things is incredibly important. So I appreciate you mentioning that point. Last question. What is something, a film that is underseen that you would like to recommend to people? It can be documentary, it can be related to your film, it could be anything that you want to put on people's radar that you think they should check out.
I can comment on something I'm watching right now. It's not a film, but it's a series. I think it's on Netflix. And now I'm going to forget what it's called, but it's one of those like Mormon town in Boulder Creek, Arizona slash, oh God, what's it called?
Is it called Keep Sweet?
What is it? No, it's
Keep
the other one.
Sweet?
It's the other one that's about that.
Who is Samuel Bateman?
Yes, that one.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the story about this guy, I was watching it last night with my wife. We were like, let's watch one episode. We watched all four. She never stays up that late. And it was just, I just was amazed that for me watching that, it's like in 2026 in this world, what this really awful person got away with and the damage that he did to generations of people was like, what was amazing to me. It was a great documentary. The whole time watching it as someone, you know, fresh off a documentary was like, why is they're continuing to shoot and tell this guy's story, why he's continuing to do bad things, you know, and it has to do
Interesting.
with underage marriage and things like that. And it brought something out of me where I had a hard time watching it. And I like things that affect me in that way, right? Where it was like, why? It's like, stop making the documentary and just get this guy arrested already. And I think, so I don't know, that's an example of things that affect me in that way where I almost physically feel the film itself. And I hope people have
Right.
gotten that a little bit from ours. But, you know, I think those are the kind of things that for me, and that just happens to be one that I was watching right now. So
For me, you know, I would say that it's probably a little older for some of the younger generation, but one of my favorite documentaries is American Movie. And the reason I love that film is because it's one of the first documentaries I ever saw that made me realize that documentaries could be funny. And
Mm.
it's laugh out loud hilarious, and still to this day one of my favorite films. And it was one of Andre's favorite films as well. But I'd also say I would challenge people to go to festivals because there's so many great documentaries that don't make it to the streamers that we saw in the last year and a half. And I think that that's where you're going to find films that really move you and change the world. And unfortunately, it's really hard to get distribution for film. But I could rattle off, 5 or 10 this year that were so unbelievably amazing, and I'm hoping they all get distribution. But I would challenge people, go to the festivals, look at documentaries, short documentaries, feature length, because the more that you're a voice for these films, the more likely they get seen and get a mass audience.
100%. I went to TIFF last year, and that was my first festival experience out in Toronto. And since then, I feel like part of the reason I'm doing this podcast is to be an advocate for people to find your local film festival. There's incredible films being made that, to be quite honest, are gonna, to me, be better than what gets attention from, let's say, the Academy or these kind of award circuits, right? So I love that. And I definitely will check out American Movie,
Oh my
1999,
God, it's the
a
best.
90s doc.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tony beat me on the answer to that question, because I that is truly one of my faves of all time too.
It's going to the top of my watch list.
Yeah,
Especially after going through the process of making a film, I have so much respect for
Yeah.
not only the filmmakers that made American movies, but the subject of the film, or two filmmakers, or a filmmaker that's trying to make his first feature and first short film. And so it's incredible and really funny.
film within a film. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
The film is called Andre is an Idiot. How can people kind of keep up with the film, its progress, where they can catch it? Anything else you gentlemen would like to plug?
Yeah, it's the film. We kind of are wrapping up on our festival circuit. We had a theatrical release that's kind of coming to an end as well. I think there's a few more theaters and a few more cities. I think we played 80 different cities though across the U.S.
Oh,
and we
awesome.
played in the U.K. as well, which is great with our distribution company joint venture here in the United States. They've done an incredible job, and then our distribution company in the U.K. Dogwolf had a UK release earlier in February. But for now, it's for pre-sale on Apple TV, I know, and I think a few other streamers are going to be renting it within the next, I think, starting in May. And from there, we're hoping that it gets picked up on a streamer for the long term, because we really want to spread the word, and we think this film, not only can entertain and make people laugh, but impact people in the ways we've talked about on this podcast.
Highly encourage you folks to seek out Andre is an Idiot. It's worth the rent. It's worth the buy, because I mean, I'd be very happy to watch it again just to show to more people. And it's an enjoyable, I mean, considering, the context, it is an enjoyable entertainment and important documentary. So Tony Benna, Lee Einhorn, thank you both so much for your time, and best of luck with everything moving forward.
All right.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Take care.